Hey guys, today I'll be updating you guys on the state of the 2022 Senate elections, which are now just 5 months away, and we are now 5 months away from knowing whether or not the Democratic Party will be able to hold on to their Senate majority that they were able to win in 2020 with the election of Joe Biden. Their win in 2020 was very small. They only won 50 seats, and with Kamala Harris, that is the only reason why they were able to win, as the vice president, of course, breaks ties. And so in 2020, they really did have a perfect storm in the state of Georgia, with both Jon Ossoff and Raphael Warnock winning their elections in the 2021 runoffs, and that was what gave the Democratic Party the control of the Senate. However, in 2022, with Joe Biden having an approval rating of just 41% and a disapproval rating of 53.8%, it is going to be very difficult for the Democratic Party to defend their Senate majority, especially considering the fact that they are now behind in the generic congressional ballot, in which they have led for the last 6 years before being overtaken by the GOP in late last year. So looking at this map here, we have 29 Republicans, 36 Democrats that are guaranteed to retain their seats because they are not up for re-election. However, looking at the political forecast here, you can see that there are far more solid Republican states, but they do have more states to defend. If you look at the toss-up states of Arizona, Georgia, Nevada, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, 3 of these states, Arizona, Georgia, and Nevada, are currently controlled by Democrats, while Pennsylvania and Wisconsin have Republican incumbents. So the 2022 matchup is pretty even, with both parties having many crucial races to defend. So looking at this map here, I'm going to start off by filling in the solid Democratic states. These are the most solid races for the Democratic Party. Their incumbents are going to win these states pretty much no matter what. It's pretty much a guaranteed win for them in these states, and for the Republicans, we have quite a few of them as well. I will be including Alaska because in the end, it will be Kelly Tshibaka and Lisa Murkowski in that race, and no matter what, whoever comes out will be a Republican. So that race, it may be competitive between those two Republicans, but as of right now, it does not really matter too much in terms of changing the balance of power. Alaska is going to elect a Republican, whoever it may be. So with the solid states filled in, 44 for the Republicans, 45 for the Democrats. And now we have the likely states. These are states in which either party has a very good chance of winning, although it is of a little bit of a lower tier than the solid states. Typically, these would be states in which we see margins of between 5 and 15%. So for the Democratic Party, I have the state of Colorado because Eli Bremer is not running now against Michael Bennet. He has been eliminated, so it will be Michael Bennet versus a Republican that they are yet to choose. And in this race, I think that with Eli Bremer out of the race, Colorado will be a little bit easier for Democrats to hold on to. That is really the only likely Democratic state I have on this map. For the GOP, I have 2, the states of Missouri and Florida. Both of these states are states that have voted Republican in the last couple of presidential elections, as well as the fact that the state of Florida does have Marco Rubio, who is a particularly strong incumbent. He won by a likely margin last time, and I think that in the environment that we're seeing in 2022, things are not going to be too much different. In the state of Missouri, this is still Missouri. It is a state that has voted for Republicans in the Senate in the last couple of elections. Claire McCaskill did lose to Josh Hawley here in 2018, and I don't think 2022 here again will be any different. Even though Eric Greens currently is expected to be the nominee for the Republican Party, I think that he can still etch out a very narrow victory there. But I think that in the end, both of these states are going to remain in the Republican column. So looking at the 2016 map, these are the states in which we have elections in again in 2022. So in 2016, the margin in Florida was 7.7 for Marco Rubio. In the state of Missouri, it was 2.8 for Roy Blunt. He was running against Jason Kander, who was an especially strong candidate. In 2022, we're not going to see anything like this, while in the state of Colorado, Michael Bennet won by 5.7%. And so looking at the map after 2020, you'll see that the Democratic Party very narrowly won in Georgia, very narrowly won the Georgia special election. They were able to pick up a win in Arizona as well. So these special elections is really what gave the Democratic Party the majority. Without the Arizona and Georgia special elections, the Democrats had no chance at winning the 2020 Senate elections. And so going into 2022, we only have one special election. That is the one in Oklahoma, because Jim Inhofe is resigning after the 2020. He is resigning after this term. He will be resigning earlier than expected, not after this term, but after the new senators are inaugurated in 2023 next year, he will be resigning 4 years early. Actually, he was just reelected in 2020. So Jim Inhofe will be resigning early. That is why we have that one special election in Oklahoma. But again, Republicans win every single county in Oklahoma, so the Democratic Party really has no chance in this state. So now we have these 8 toss-up races. These are the ones that are going to matter. If you look at the political forecast here, you'll see that the 8 races are the lean, the toss-up, and the lean GOP races, lean Dem, toss-up, and lean GOP. And then we do have the state of Ohio. I do think that Ohio will be a little bit closer than expected because of the fact that I think that Tim Ryan is a good candidate for this race, while J.D. Vance I do not think is the best candidate. He really did only win in the end because he got the support and endorsement of Donald Trump very late in the race. However, he really only won a third of the vote in the Republican primary, winning just 32.2% of the vote. That is not even close to a majority. So I think that J.D. Vance will struggle in the general election in terms of getting Republicans on his side, while Tim Ryan won almost 70% of the vote. He is the most prominent Democrat in the state of Ohio currently, besides Sherrod Brown, who is already an incumbent U.S. Senator. So I think that Tim Ryan is really the best candidate that the Democratic Party could put up. But, as you can see here, this race is going to be difficult for him. I do fully expect him to lose. He did lead in 3 polls. However, two of them were from earlier last year, and this one in April was before Vance was even nominated. So I think that J.D. Vance in the end is going to end up on top in this race. I think that even though he is a particularly weak candidate, the state of Ohio did vote for Donald Trump by 8% both times and has been trending more and more to the right recently. And of course, Joe Biden's approval rating and the generic congressional ballot is not going to help the Democratic Party at all. So looking at the state of Ohio, currently I will classify it as being lean for the Republicans. I definitely think they have an advantage here, but the Democratic Party will still pose a strong challenge. In the state of North Carolina, this race, we already saw the primaries here as well. Ted Budd is the Republican nominee. He is currently serving in the U.S. House of Representatives. Cheri Beasley is the Democratic nominee. She's the former Chief Justice of the North Carolina Supreme Court. So if you do look at polling between these two individuals, they were able to win, both of them, a majority of the vote in their respective primaries, but Ted Budd has not been behind in any single poll. There is one in which they tied, but Ted Budd is polling very well. So I could actually see a margin of over 5% for Ted Budd. If you look at the 2020 election in the state of North Carolina, Thom Tillis did defeat Cal Cunningham by a margin of 1.8%. And this was especially surprising because if you do look at the polls for this race in 2020, the Democratic Party was doing very well. Cal Cunningham led by some impressive margins going into this race, and even going into right before the election, Cal Cunningham was leading in every single poll that was released, and his margins went down significantly because of a scandal that he had in which he cheated on his wife. It was a sexting scandal, so and that definitely impacted his campaign very negatively, but Cal Cunningham was in a very good position, and even in the end, he was expected to win, and in the end, he did end up losing still by 1.7% to Thom Tillis. So I do think that North Carolina is going to be a race in which the Republicans will definitely be able to win by over 5% if things go well for them, but I will categorize it as being lean. I do think that it is of a more competitive race than what we have in Missouri and Florida. And so moving on to the state of Wisconsin, we have another Republican incumbent in this state running for another Republican incumbent. The other two are actually open seats because if you look at North Carolina, Richard Burr is not running for re-election, and in Ohio, Rob Portman is not running for re-election. If these two were running for re-election, these races would definitely be likely for the GOP. In the state of Wisconsin, Ron Johnson is running for his re-election despite promising that he would not run again in 2022. The Democratic primary, currently the frontrunner is Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes. He has been the frontrunner basically throughout the entirety of the Democratic primary here. The primary is in a couple of weeks, and I fully expect him to win. Ron Johnson, of course, winning on the GOP side. In the one poll that was released between these two presumptive nominees, 43% each. This was in September of 2021. And if you go back to that time, you'll see that at this point, Joe Biden's approval rating was just very much not great, but he only recently went into the negatives at this point. Before the month of August, Joe Biden was relatively popular. His approval rating was relatively stable for a very long time, but after the pullout in Afghanistan, as well as increasing inflation rates and just everything that's going on in the country with gas prices as well, Biden's approval rating has not improved since then. So I think that in the state of Wisconsin, it will be difficult for the Democratic Party. Even though Joe Biden won the state in 2020, he won it by less than the margin that Trump had in 2016. Ron Johnson being the Republican incumbent, he has money on his side. I will categorize Wisconsin as well as being lean for the GOP. And the next state I want to look at is the state of New Hampshire, this time with a Democratic incumbent. This race I don't think is going to be that competitive. I do think the Democratic Party has the clear edge in this. On the Democratic side, Maggie Hassan, the incumbent Democratic senator who defeated Kelly Ayotte in the 2016 election. So she was able to defeat a Republican incumbent last time. On the Republican side, Donald Boldeau is the clear frontrunner, as you can see by this one poll released last month, showing him at 33%. Every other candidate does not even reach 5%. Democratic Party clearly has the advantage here. I don't think there's too much to talk about. Maggie Hassan will very likely end up retaining her seat in the U.S. Senate. And of course, this is after Jeanne Shaheen won by over 15% over Corky Messner just last year. So this puts the Democrats at 47 and the Republicans at 49. I do have New Hampshire as being currently lean for the Democrats. And the final lean state on this map is the state of Arizona. This is a state that I think the Democratic Party, with their incumbency advantage, will have I think that they do have the clear advantage in this race as well. Although the state of Arizona is going to be one of the most contested races nonetheless. In 2020, of course, Mark Kelly in the special election defeated Martha McSally, the incumbent senator. She was appointed by Doug Ducey after losing to Kyrsten Sinema in 2018. So basically, the Martha McSally has given the Democratic Party 2 Senate seats already. She is obviously not going to be nominated for a third time. And so on the Republican side now, we have 3 potential frontrunners: Mark Bonovich, Jim Lamont, and Blake Masters. All 3 of these individuals recently have had around 20% of support, so this primary is definitely going to be one to watch. And if you look at the polling between Mark Kelly and all of these potential candidates, Mark Kelly has led in every single poll that has been released. This one from Blueprint Polling from earlier last month shows Mark Kelly with a significant lead at almost 50% in all 3 of these polls, with his potential Republican opponents in the 30s. So I think that Mark Kelly will have a pretty smooth road to his re-election, although of course the Republicans' numbers will jump up once they end up with a nominee. But Mark Kelly is relatively popular, much more popular than Kyrsten Sinema, and I think that he will end up winning his re-election at this point in time. This race is one that definitely does benefit him as the state of Arizona continues to shift to the left. In 2020, 2018, Democrats won all the major statewide races, and in 2022, even with the governorship, the Democratic Party has a very good chance at flipping the governor's mansion in Arizona as well. So we have 3 states left, 49 right now for the GOP, 48 for the Democrats. These 3 states, Georgia, Nevada, and Pennsylvania, I think are undoubtedly going to be the 3 closest races that we have this November. Pennsylvania incumbent Pat Toomey of the GOP is not running for his re-election. In Georgia, we have a Democratic incumbent in, of course, Raphael Warnock. He is running for his re-election. And in Nevada, Catherine Cortez Masto, a Democrat, is also running for his re-election. So we have 2 Democrats very vulnerable and 1 Republican-held seat that is currently open, very vulnerable for the GOP. So starting off with the state of Nevada, I do think that the Democratic Party is going to struggle here. In 2016, Catherine Cortez Masto defeated Joe Heck by a margin of 2.4%. So this was nothing special. It wasn't very close, but it wasn't any sort of impressive margin. In 2022, she will be renominated, and on the Republican side, Adam Laxalt, the former Attorney General of the state, is currently the frontrunner. I believe his father was the governor a few years back, so he definitely does have connections to the state. His family is a prominent political one in the state of Nevada. He is basically leading with almost a majority in every single poll that's been released for the GOP primary here. He's going to win that. But looking at the polls between Adam Laxalt and Catherine Cortez Masto, you will see that Cortez Masto is not doing very well in the polling, even though many of these polls are funded by the GOP. As you can see here, the Trafalgar Group, NSRC, as well as, or NRSC, and McLaughlin. All of these polls they are funded by either Republican PACs or Republican campaigns. And these ones on the Democratic side shows polls that favor the Democrats a little bit more. So even with this favoring, many of the polls favoring Lexalt, just, from how they are done, Catherine Cortez-Masto's numbers are still very worrying for the Democratic Party. She is also in a state that is not the most reliably Democratic, although the state has had Democratic senators for the last decade or so, as well as voting for Democratic candidates on the presidential level. But with the national environment being what it is, I think that Adam Lexalt has a very good shot at this race, and so I will categorize the state of Nevada as being tilt for the Republican Party, giving them 50 seats. I do think that they will very possibly end up on top after this November. Catherine Cortez-Masto is not a particularly strong nor particularly weak candidate just by herself, so I do think that given the national environment, the Republicans have a slight edge in Nevada. The next state I want to go over is the state of Pennsylvania. This one we just had a very exciting primary in. On the Democratic side, John Fetterman has been nominated, while for the Republican nomination, it is still very much in the air right now as the votes are being recounted, although Mehmet Oz has, I believe, a 97% chance at ending up winning anyways. He is only leading by less than 1,000 votes, so that is a little bit worrying for his campaign, but it is very likely that David McCormick is going to end up on top. So Mehmet Oz did get the endorsement of Donald Trump. If you look at his polling numbers, they were not great towards the end. He was leading in most of the polls, and then Kathy Barnett's numbers shot up exponentially in basically the last week or so of the campaign, and that really chipped away at the support of both McCormick and Oz. So Kathy Barnett was a lot more on the Trump side. David McCormick was a lot more of a moderate. So Mehmet Oz did end up winning very narrowly. I don't think he's a good candidate. I think that he is quite a weak candidate in this race. I think that his name recognition is not going to help him too much. And the fact that he only won 31% of his nomination race, I think that he will struggle against John Fetterman. John Fetterman is the incumbent lieutenant governor of Pennsylvania, a much better candidate. If you look at the polling between John Fetterman and Mehmet Oz, the one poll that we saw, John Fetterman does lead by 2%. This is right after Mehmet Oz announced his campaign. This is a poll that was funded by a Democratic PAC, or a Democratic group. So this is going to be difficult, I think, for the Democrats nonetheless. The seat is currently held by Republican Pat Toomey, who will be retiring. So flipping the state will be difficult, but right now I do think that John Fetterman has an advantage. He is just clearly a much better candidate than Mehmet Oz. I think he will appeal much better to independents, even though he is actually to the left of Conor Lamb, who he defeated in the primary. So in the state of Pennsylvania, I will categorize that as being tilt for the Democratic Party. I think that they definitely have a good shot at winning Pennsylvania. And the final state I want to go over is the state of Georgia, although I do have a clear opinion on this race, and that is that Raphael Warnock is a much better candidate than Herschel Walker. It will be difficult here for the Democratic Party as well. Like in the state of Nevada, the national environment just does not favor them. On the Republican primary, on the Republican side, Herschel Walker won 68% of the vote. He was the clear frontrunner and the clear nominee for basically the entirety of 2022 and 2021 so far until his race. And if you look at the polls, they're just not good for the Democrats. Most of the polls are not even funded by Republican groups. Herschel Walker led in 7 polls released in a row. This most recent one does show Warnock ahead from Survey USA, but it'll be very difficult for him, even though I think Warnock is a particularly good nominee for this race, while Walker is quite a poor one. It is still in a state that Donald Trump won by over 5% in 2016, and a race that the Democrats barely won in 2021. If you look at Warnock's last election, he won this race after Joe Biden won Georgia by a very narrow margin, and the Democratic side had all of that momentum because this race is what decided whether or not Democrats could control the Senate. So that really got the Democratic Party out. And in 2022, he is just not going to have that sort of enthusiasm, and I do think that Herschel Walker is a better candidate than Kelly Loeffler. Kelly Loeffler was an atrocious candidate for the GOP. She was, of course, appointed by Brian Kemp, but she was a horrible candidate for this race. So in 2022, with Herschel Walker, I think, as a little bit better of a candidate, I do think that the Republicans have a very good chance at winning in the state of Georgia. So I will categorize that as being tilt for the GOP. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure you like it down below if you enjoyed it. Comment down below which races you're watching. Join my Discord server if you haven't, link at the very top of the description below. Subscribe to my channel if you have not. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one.